Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine, and welcome to my studio. I am excited to show you all around a little bit. We're going to talk about this custom desk that's in front of me. I've been getting a ton of questions about this. It is a sit to stand desk, which has been a total game changer for me as well as my health. I've had back issues. Who would have thunk it? Being a professional music producer and audio engineer for over 15 years, you do a lot of sitting. This was a decision that I should have made a long time ago, but it's been very helpful in my workflow and enabling me to put in longer hours in terms of mixing and producing. We're also going to talk about the analog hardware, the channel strip, the interface. I've got the SSL Fusion over here, some vintage hardware. We've got monitoring. We're going to talk about the computer. I'll shed some light on that. And I also use a Stream Deck that does a lot of different things, including lighting here in the studio, as well as some different custom things I can do with my interface. I actually started my YouTube channel from a garage, lived in the mountains, very, very cold, filming videos. That's why I was usually in my winter coat. Hey, what's going on out there? Today, I want to talk about studio gear and software. So it's been a slow journey. I didn't get this stuff all at once. Real quick, I want to tell you about this video's sponsor, which is Sweetwater Sound. Now, I've personally been buying studio gear from Sweetwater for over 20 years, including a lot of the gear that you're going to see in this video today. And I can honestly tell you, I've never had a bad experience with Sweetwater. They have the best gear selection, all of the latest products, super fast shipping, and you get your own personal sales engineer who's ready to answer all of your pre-sale and post-sale questions about the products that you are considering adding to your studio setup. So I'm going to put a link in the description to my Sweetwater shop, and that will connect you to all of the products that I trust in my studio setup that are available on Sweetwater. And with that, let's dive in. All right, so the question that I've been getting a lot is, who made the desk? Where'd you get it? What's the story on this thing? So this was built by a guy named Jesse. His company is called Temple and Spark. He let me select everything about this desk, including the type of wood. I went with a maple. I wanted something light, airy. It also doesn't show dust, which is an advantage there. Also, it is sit to stand. Like I said, that's probably the best feature about it. It has customizable, programmable places that you can store. And so I have a sitting, and then if I want to move up to the standing, I just click it twice. The desk will raise up. Being able to stand while I'm mixing, while I'm working, while I'm mastering, producing, even pulling out this keyboard right here, but just being able to move around and have some flexibility. It's great for my physical state. My back, my shoulders, my neck have just felt so much better with a typical work day than when I was just sitting. A lot of people emphasize your chair, which, yeah, the chair is important, but if you're sitting in it for 12 hours a day, it doesn't really matter. I've had the expensive Herman Miller Aerons. This is a Hayworth chair, another reputable company. And not to say that they're not nice, but again, if you're sitting for long periods of time, it's not good regardless. Being able to switch up, I'd say every 30, 45 minutes, stand up, and then after I've stood up for a while, I can sit down. The fatigue factor and the stiffness in my back, it has changed for the better in so many ways. But hey, better late than never. Definitely a huge plus side of the desk. When I lift this up for the standing option, you can't really see any cables back there. It's just very clean, and that's part of Jesse's design. He has a proprietary cable management system. My old desk was just a mess of cable knots, and it just wasn't very clean looking. I had specific dimensions that I sent to Jesse for the design, and I also laid out the racks based on how I wanted this set up. So we have 4U rack on the left side and a 4U rack on the right side, and there's 3U in the middle. Got the TC Electronic Clarity M for my metering over here, and then we have the CalDigit TS4 Hub. I'll have a single Thunderbolt cable connected to my laptop at any given time, and I can just unplug that, take the laptop, and I have my full setup, which is great. I've talked about the laptop setup, why I went with the MacBook Pro in a separate video. So I will put a link to that if you want to check out the details, but this is just a M1 Max MacBook Pro, and that's the centerpiece for my Logic Pro based studio here. And then everything is routed audio-wise through a new UA Apollo X8 Gen 2. A lot of you have asked why I went from the RME to the Apollo, and the biggest reason is for console. So UAD has their own routing software and a management system called Console. I can process with their plugins in real time. In my opinion, they have the best analog modeled hardware plugins. And so just being able to have some of these options during tracking specifically is really, really nice. And I also like the flexibility of Console in terms of the layout. Those of you who saw Total Mix with RME, it's a little convoluted. It takes a little more time to get around, and you're gonna have quite a steep learning curve. So I was skeptical about UA previously before the Apollo X8 Gen 2 came out, because I just thought the converters and the sound quality of the headphone outputs, it just wasn't quite on par of what I was using previously. But I decided to demo the Gen 2, and it sounds phenomenal. Everything is where I need it to be. Of course, the other big advantage is that I can use UAD powered plugins in Logic without taking up any CPU in my DAW, which is a huge, huge advantage for mixing. Let's talk about the center rack in front of me. This is kind of the mothership of everything. So obviously we just talked about the interface. Then we have the Portico 2 channel, not to be confused with the Portico 2 master bus processor, which is more for mastering. This has a preamp, EQ section, compressor, de-esser, and it also has silk red and blue, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But I did a shootout with a lot of different channel strips. I had an Aphex channel previously, which was a great budget channel strip. There's nothing wrong with that Aphex. Actually, for the price, I would argue that's one of the better options out there. But I wanted something with a little bit more flexibility, and I wanted something that had a bit more of a detailed sound. The Aphex is a little more woolly to me and a little bit more mid forward. If you want to get the most out of everything that you're tracking, the Neve Pre to me just sounds bigger than life. Then you process it with an EQ that I would describe as kind of foolproof. Every move that you can make with this EQ is going to sound musical. It's very hard to get it to sound bad. It's kind of like a greatest hits of the Neve EQs. If you set it to 12 on the high boost, it sounds a lot like a 1073, but you've also got a 25 mark, which is going to be more like an Avalon, that bright sheen. You also have a built-in de-esser, which you're not going to find in most channel strips. And you can use that for any frequency in the high mid frequency notches here. So very flexible control. And then you have a compressor with two different modes. So you have a feed forward and a feed back. The feed forward is going to be a little bit more modern sound, more transparent, faster. And then if you go feed back, it's going to give you more of that classic compressor sound, a little bit slower action. And then you have ratios all the way up to 40:1, so more like a limiter. I have yet to find a compressor that's more powerful and more flexible built into a channel strip like the Portico 2 channel. Finally, you get that silk control. So if you want to get a little bit more harmonic content, the red is going to give you more mids, more highs, a little bit more sparkle. And if you go blue, it's going to give you some of those fatter lows and low mids. Moving to the left rack here, we have the SSL Fusion, which I've had this for about 4 or 5 years now. This is an indispensable tool in my mastering process, and I utilize it with the I/O plugin in Logic, so I can run everything out of my stereo bus into the Fusion and then back again, and maybe use a limiter, as the Fusion does not have a limiter or a maximizer. The Fusion does exactly what it says. It gives you analog color that you're not going to get in the box. And so I just find processing with the vintage drive, you get a nice weight, a nice thickness to your sound. The Violet EQ, this top end, even at 20, is very light. It just sounds great. The high frequency compressor is going to control harshness. It's almost like processing with tape. It just smooths out different peaks. And then your stereo image section is just a very nice mid-side processing that is still going to maintain mono compatibility. You also finally have a transformer. I don't generally use the transformer. I just find that I get enough brightness and I get enough saturation out of the EQ in the vintage drive, so that transformer can be a little bit overkill. But if you're just using the transformer without the top end of the valid EQ, it does have a really cool sound to it. Below this is something I got into more recently, which is the DBX 900 series. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of the 902 de-esser, which it's arguably the best de-esser ever made. Give me the harshest sounding vocal mic that you have. Maybe this one right here, the 103, very bright, top end, a little shrill. The 902 will basically make any microphone sound more expensive and more vintage, so gotta have that one. Over here, we got the 903. This is the over easy compressor limiter, and I generally use this as a limiter. I just set the ratio to infinity to 1, and it just tames the extreme peaks while I'm tracking. If for some reason a vocalist or myself gets too loud, or recording an instrument maybe gets a little hotter than I'm wanting it to, this 903 limiter will just tame those peaks for me. Coming into the box, we're not going to have any surprises or clipping and distortion that's going to limit what we can do in the mixing process. Once again, this is the CalDigit TS4 Hub. Very handy to have if you're using a laptop, or if you want to extend the different connections that you have for your computer to the different ports. We've got USB-C, regular USB right here on the front. I also have a memory card slot that I can take my memory card out of my camera, load footage from that straight in. It has Ethernet, so it just keeps all of your cables managed in this one hub. On the left side, this is the TC Electronic Clarity M stereo version, and this does all of my metering. I can monitor things like LUFS, true peak. There's a vector scope. You've also got a loudness measurement radar, and the real-time analyzer is usually where I keep this. And I can monitor anything in my studio at any given moment. So I don't have to have Logic open. We don't have to load any plugins on the master bus. Any signal in my studio is coming through the Clarity M, so that I can take a glance over, see where I'm at. Indispensable metering tool. I did a full review on the Clarity M. I'll link if you want to check it out. Coming over to the right side, this is a little bit more simple rack here. I just have this nice little shelf where I store things like AC adapters and extra cables, hard drives. I've got accessories for mounting my camera, phone mounts. Got a Humex, which these are really useful. If you've got a noisy piece of equipment or an AC adapter for your laptop or something, a Humex is definitely something you want to have there. Also got my handy sound level meter. This is from Radio Shack. Some of y'all out there are probably too young. You probably don't even know what Radio Shack is. If you ever need to check your levels for your monitors or your headphones, this is really useful to have. And then up here we have the Radio Engineering Power 1. It's got 3 convenient AC plugs on the front, and it has an on-off switch right there on the front, which if I turn this off, it will turn off every component here on the desk, which is convenient when I wrap up for the day. Just close out my computer, flip that switch, everything's off. Same thing when I come down and I'm ready to work, hit that one switch, everything's on and ready to go. I've actually had issues with quite a few power conditioners in the past. I'm not going to name any other brands, but they are designed to remove hum and clean the signals for your equipment, not make them dirtier, which is what some of those did. I am happy to say that this Radio Engineering Power 1 haven't had any issues. It is whisper quiet, does not introduce any noise into my mic signal or anything else in the studio. Would highly recommend them. They're also very affordable. Let's talk monitoring. Up here we have the Atom Audio A8H. These are a 3-way monitor. They're ported in the front, so they've got great low end response. I do have a subwoofer. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I don't generally need it with the A8H because these things can thump. I do have some room treatment. You're gonna see these GIK panels around the room. I also have a cloud up here that I will show you. I don't remember who made it, but I'll put links to all of this stuff again in the description. My room does sound pretty good, but these monitors translate extremely well. Now I demoed these Those of you, again, who have followed the channel, you know that I used to have a pair of Event. I had a TR8 for about 10 years, and then I had the 2030 for about another 10 years or so, and they sounded fairly similar, but the 2030 was a great monitor, but I did have some issues with translation. They were a little bit bottom heavy, and they didn't have as much detail in the mids. So the Atom mids are incredibly detailed. The translation that I've gotten with these outside of the studio going to the car is pretty spot on every time. Using those on mixes with clients in the first month, I didn't even have notes on a lot of my mixes in that first month, which told me everything that I needed to know. There was not a lot of guesswork. They do come with the SonarWorks room correction. However, I don't use any room correction. A lot of you ask me that. I just keep them on the pure or the flat setting, and everything sounds the way I want it to. Just recently, I also invested in these ISO Acoustic ISO 200 stands. They're built for larger monitors. I was very skeptical about these because usually I would just keep the monitor on the desk, maybe with like an Auralex Mopad is what they used to be called. I wanted to try something different just to see if this isolation would actually make a difference. After spending some time with them, I found out very quickly that the accuracy was actually much better with them. Now, I'm not saying they're going to change your life and they're going to, just fix any monitoring issues in your room, but they are helpful. Underneath the desk, I will show you that we have a subwoofer. It is the LSR10 from JBL. Affordable sub, pretty straightforward. I'm using the bass management option in console, which is really convenient. That will allow you to utilize that subwoofer. And we also have a crossover. So I set the satellites to 80 Hertz, which means when I turn on bass management and then the satellites, in my case, the A8H, they're going to play everything above 80. I was actually in the studio with a famous engineer, mixing engineer, a while ago, and he was telling me that he sets his subwoofer to the point where he can just barely hear it and feel the sensation of it, but you don't want it to be overbearing in your monitoring environment, and that's the way that I set mine. I want it to just give me that feeling, the sensation of the bass. I don't want it to be shaking the room and taking control of my monitoring environment. It's a nice reference to be able to hear what things are gonna sound like, say in a club or a bigger speaker environment. Maybe in the car, you're gonna get more of those sub lows. While we're talking about monitoring, we'll talk about headphones. I know not all of you have the ability to utilize studio monitors or a subwoofer in your space, especially if you're in an apartment or somewhere where you need to be respectful of your neighbors. Headphones have gotten a lot better. I use headphones quite often, as you all see in my videos, even for mixing and mastering, and I don't really feel like I'm missing out as much as I used to. The ones on my head right now are the Sony MDR M1s. I feel like they're very lightweight, they're very comfortable. They sound like a more balanced MDR 7506, which those were my first studio headphones. I'm just used to the response of those, but these have a much smoother top end and a much fuller low end. I do track with other artists and it comes down to preference. So you want to have different options available. And I also find that headphones have different strengths that I will rely on, whether it's for tracking or if one pair is better for mastering or for mixing specifically, or, maybe there's a pair that just inspires me from a production aspect if I'm sitting down to make music. Personally, and most recently, I'm using the M1 and the DT700 Pro X from Beyerdynamic. These are the two that I just find myself bouncing back between the most. Now you're gonna see in front of me that I have a Stream Deck on the desk here, and this is not for streaming necessarily, although I do stream sometimes. The Stream Deck has a lot of useful functions for a music studio. For the UAD users, you do not need to go out and buy an Apollo Twin to have a dedicated monitor knob. You can actually use the Stream Deck. So I've programmed some plus and minus controls, and you'll see that I can control the monitoring levels for my Apollo X8 from the Stream Deck. And all you have to do, if you use Command F11 and Command F12, that will give you a plus and minus for the monitor levels on console. I utilize Philips Hue bulbs throughout the studio here, and every single light there is a Philips Hue. I have programmable light scenes that I have on the Stream Deck. So by hitting these buttons, we can actually change the lighting, and we could even turn all the lighting off or on, and just very helpful to be able to do that right here from the Stream Deck. I've also got something that will show me all of the CPU activity. I can just click that button, or it will show me in a percentage how much of my CPU is being used, which is helpful if I'm in a very busy mixing or mastering session using a lot of plugins. I can keep an eye and make sure that I'm not pushing the computer too hard. Also got a button to pull up UAD console on demand. Really nice to be able to do that. So if you thought the Stream Deck was just for streaming and gaming, think again. This is a serious workflow enhancer for music studios, so check that out. We also have a pull-out keyboard tray here that Jesse designed. I love this. It's really smooth. It's got some extra space on the sides. I have a 61 key Arturia Keylab, which is great. I love the key feel of these. The pads are very sensitive for drums. You also have some faders for mixing, transport controls. To me, Arturia makes the highest quality MIDI controllers, the drivers, the support. Everything's really stable, and I'm able to get it going in Logic Pro without any hitches. Would highly recommend MIDI controllers from Arturia. Some other keyboards behind me here. This is just a classic, the Virus Indigo, and I've had this for a long time. I made a lot of different productions with this. I don't use it a ton anymore, but it is really nice to have. It just has a sound to it that you're not going to get out of a plugin. Access did something really special with the DSP in here. I wish they would bring out a new Virus, but I don't know if that's going to happen. If anybody has any word on that, please let me know. I think it would be really exciting. Below that, I have another Arturia Keylab 49. I use this to control some different MIDI instruments that I don't actually have out right now, but I do have an MPC, an old Akai that I like, and I can program notes with this keyboard. It's just easier to just hook that up very quickly. Whew. All right, y'all, so I think we covered everything here. If there's something that I forgot, did I forget anything? Oh, the monitor or the screen in front of me, this is an LG, I think it's a 32-inch. I don't know if they make it anymore, but I'll try to find something comparable. I'll put that in the description. If I forgot something, y'all let me know in the comments, or if there's something you want me to expand on a little bit, I'm happy to do that. Again, just making this video in hopes that it will help you make some decisions. I hope you'll consider a sit-to-stand desk for your health purposes. And if you can't afford one, just remember not to sit too long. I definitely made that mistake earlier in my career, and I'm just telling you, you will pay for it. I don't want you to go through what I've been through. I hope you found this helpful, maybe a little bit interesting in terms of the thought process of why I use these different things. Again, don't worry about getting everything at once. Take your time, have fun, learn what you have now, make the most of it. That's going to pay off dividends in the end, and then you can progress as your skills progress. Thanks for being with me, and we'll see you in the next video. Much love.